Hi, this is Vaughan in Nova Scotia. It's a Wednesday and it's sunny outside, and I'm going to throw a very big sink. So I'm going to give you a little intro on, just centering such a huge piece, and then what you have to do to actually kind of pull the wall out, etc., etc. My cat's asleep behind me, if you can see, sleeping on my sweater. Anyway, so the first thing you got to do is get a very clean bat. Let's give you a good view. I might have to put this back a little bit further than normal just to be able to see the whole thing. There you go, that's not so bad. Alright, so if I have to adjust that later, I can, I guess. Let's plug the mic in a little bit. Might be easier. Alright, so you've got to have your body really secure for doing a big sink like this. This is 25 pounds of clay here, and I've rounded it off because it really is important that you can center this fairly easily. And get a nice clean bat. Get a bat that doesn't bend when you lift it off. Get some power. There we go. The wheel is a Shimpo Whisper that I'm going to throw on. I'm just checking to see if the bat judders at all. Not really. There's a little vibration there, but it's not one of those bats that bangs around as you're trying to center. Alright, so I've dampened it. Make sure that you've got no hollow area on the top area that you're going to have on the bat. And you roll it over. This is the entire bag of clay. So it's a 25-pound lump of clay. So that's about 11 and a half kilos, I think. So what I'm trying to do before I start spinning it is push it into center. I heard somebody call this slap centering the other day. Because then when you start it spinning around, I just lifted it off the pins. Let's see if I've got that. Nope, center, put it back on. This is one of those plastic bats, I think they call it. And I must have just lifted it off the pin. Ooh. There. Hard to put back on the pin because the thing is so heavy to maneuver around. There you go, that's that one. I like it when you can see the pins through. That's a little easier. If you've got a dirty wheel like me as well, just make sure you don't get any dry stuff that catches onto the piece as well. Alright, wheel head clean, jazz pulled right up. Here's a trick. This is hard to center, so I've got my wheel so that I can stick my elbow into this wall behind me here. I fastened this wheel and wall just that right distance, and I can move the wheel to and fro just to give me that little extra push from my elbow, because it really, it's a tough thing to center, 25 pounds of clay. Alright, so there we go, we're weathering it. Do your initial smoothing. That's just to stop any little bumps that you're going to catch. And then I always round off the top area to make sure you don't have a hollow. So I'm pushing up a little bit like that to make sure we don't have a hollow build up in the top when I push in to center it. There you go. So then, measuring again. Oh, see, now if I wedge my hand in there, I don't have to put muscle power onto this piece. I've got my elbow wedged into the wall. It'd be nice if it was a cushion there. It was a little easier because it hurts your elbow a little bit if you're not careful. So my arm is just like a, there's a Jigger and Jolly machine that has an arm that comes down that's made of wood, and it's kind of doing that. The clay is not able to push my arm backwards and forwards, and that's a really good tip, because a lot of wheels, they're sitting in the middle of a floor without walls around, but I built these, what I call my little enclosure, so that I don't spread clay all over the studio. It catches all the splashing. Now I've got it mostly centered, I'm just going to give myself a little coning to kind of, because I'd like to push it back down. It's pretty centered already. And that was just from my elbow pushing in there. You know, my mask strap is going to get caught in the clay in a second. You can tell it's COVID days, we're all wearing masks. So let's clean my hand off and I can move that strap away. I actually tucked it down into my shirt and it just fallen out again. So my studio's in Nova Scotia if you're a first-time viewer, and we're on the South Shore. So if you look for Halifax, Nova Scotia, and you go down the coast, sort of southwest from Halifax, we're about halfway down towards Yarmouth. Not even that far, actually. Let's put this strap underneath here. There you go, that's better. Alright, so I've coned it up. Now I'm going to push down again. I'm going to get the wheel going a bit faster. Now another thing you don't want to do is mushroom this out, because it'll fold over itself if you do that, and you'll end up with an air pocket locked into the wall of the clay. Move my wheel around a bit. It's all about positioning your body. Now I'm going to stick my elbow back into the wall. Remember, if it starts to dry, you've got to let go slowly. See how easy this is? Because my elbows, look, it's locked right in there. I'm not a big guy. I mean, I'm only 5'4", I used to be 5'5" until the age thing happened. But now I'm 5'4" and a bit. That bit's really important. Okay, so there you go. Centered. Without that much pressure. I use the sponge for this bit to soften where my fingers are going down. And it's about elbow again, just give some stability. And push down to open up just a bit. And then that's a lot of pressure to push down, so it dried the clay out. So I'm wetting the sponge again. So whenever you're doing pottery, you've got to make sure it's hard on your body, so you've got to try to make everything as easy as possible. There is a thing called, I think it's called a clay mate. It's a device you fasten to your wheel. Oh, strong arm. It's called a strong arm. And they sell those out of New York State. I have one, but I don't need it for this clay because the clay is fairly soft. But if I was centering an even bigger piece of clay, the strong arm is a really good help. Now I don't know how far this is going down, so I'm going to take the water out and have a look. It's a sink, so I've got to leave about an inch at the bottom anyway. Eee, that was pretty close. So now I'm going to open up. So I can have a little better look. Now, this bat, as I tested it at the beginning, is not juddering and bouncing on the pins, so that's important on such a big piece of clay. So make sure the bat is a good one. As they get older, these bats all seem to wobble a little bit, and they have a device now that you can put underneath the bats to stop them wobbling. It's just a piece of foam that you wet, and it actually grips the bat. I think it's called a bat gripper. I actually went to Michael's Crafts and bought some craft foam. It does the same thing, and it was $1 a sheet. And I was able to get 2 bat grippers out of that. Sorry, bat gripper. When you're a potter, you have to save money as much any way you can. Alright, so now I have a very thick cylinder. I'm going to stop the wheel. Yep, I think that's just about right. for the depth, for the thickness at the bottom. So I'm wetting it outside of the wall, inside of the wall. I'm going to use my knuckles here rather than my fingers. My fingers on the outside and my knuckle on the inside. And I'm going to pull the wall up. Oh, there was a little dry spot there that I caught my finger on. So ease this, don't push it too hard, you just be patient. You know, a sink, it's a big piece of clay, but it just takes about 15 minutes. It's not that long. And you don't force anything. You don't want to have suddenly realize you went too thin. And take a look at the bottom again. When you have a sink, you're going to put the drain in, so you have to have this little hollow area in the bottom of each sink. So I like to leave an inch to at the bottom. And yep, that's definitely an inch. Now I'm going to do the pull again. Just a light pull this time, just to sort of lift a little bit of the clay up. I'm trying to even the wall a bit. I'm not trying to thin it too much. You're going to try and get this wall as even as possible. Because thick pieces when you fire the kiln, I'm actually firing my gas kiln, so I'm listening for it. It's roaring away. It's at about 1125 centigrade at the moment. It's going up to 1225. So we've got about an hour and a half before it reaches. Tried timing it to reach about 6 o'clock tonight. And it's now 4:18, so I might be ahead of schedule. But it's got to soak for half an hour. Okay, so now I'm going to push in with my outside fingers deep in the clay and do a pull. So this is where I'm really going to get some height and some width. Slowing the wheel down too. This is a vessel sink. I don't want it too tall, we're going to have it quite wide. So that's way higher than I need it to be, but by the time I widen it, it's going to shrink back down. And they want a big sink, about 18, 19 inches across. It's an order. Look at all the clay that came off there. That's one of the things. I figure I lose a pound to 2 pounds of clay. So that's almost a kilo of clay by the time you finish throwing something like this with all the clay coming off. Now I'm not wetting the outside, I'm just doing a push on the inside with a wet sponge. My fingers on the outside are just lightly dragging on the surface basically. But the inside is slippery with the sponge. There you go, the sponge was trying to come out of my hand. Yeah, so this is September 9th, and we're still getting 25 degrees centigrade in Nova Scotia. That's about 80 degrees today. Don't tell anybody. Everybody thinks we live near the Arctic. But they did get snow in Canada yesterday, so of course we have the Arctic right here in Canada, remember? So the Arctic Circle crosses Canada. Look at the size of this, it's looking good. Now I'm making sure that I compress that rim a little bit. There's a lot of slip built up on the edge there. So I pressed that down and it's gone back into the clay, or just soaked into the sponge. Now I'm going to do that same thing again. I'm going to just try and get a bit wider. These people would like it to have a sort of trumpet feel to it at the top, I think. I've made this sink once before, and I wasn't happy with it when it came out. The glazing a big piece like this is really hard. There you go. So the sponge is just pushing the clay from the inside out. There you go. Same again, my hand has not, I haven't wet the outside of the piece, it's just the inside. So I'm just going for a bit wider. That's a pretty big sink. I would say that's 18 to 19 inches, but I've got to remember the shrinkage, which is about 12%, I would say. But anyway, what I was saying with the glazing, it's tough to hold something like this. I had to glaze with a landscape kind of feel to the glaze, and pouring the glaze to try and give the feeling of hillsides, and it basically just ran really thick at the rims, and so I ended up wiping it off and then reglazing, and I really wasn't happy the way it looked in the end. So I've got to figure out what to do with this. I might have to call them and ask them if they want to change the design. Some things you just can't do. I couldn't really, I don't spray glazes much, but I don't think this is one you could spray. I mostly dip and pour with my glazes. I've sprayed a few in the past, and I don't like to do that. I have a spray booth that's really good. I use a heavy-duty fan that you put in a chicken coop, you know, like a factory-style chicken coop, with 6 filters in the actual spray booth, so nothing goes out. But it means that you are actually, you know, got to be very careful that nothing stays around you as well. So I don't like to spray glazes. Now what I'm doing, let's see if I can show you what I'm doing here. Let's lift this up a touch. That's a bit better. So I'm pushing down with my finger right in that, about 3 inches across, and basically that's where the drain is going to go, but it needs to be recessed in a little bit as the flange of the drain. And so the water doesn't stay in the sink, basically. You've got this little hollow area where the drain sits. There you go. I could trim this out a little bit later on as well if it feels like it isn't deep enough, but you don't need much. I mean, the metal is very shallow. Alright, so there we go. Now I have to consider the smooth wall. And once again, as I'm trimming, I could even use the back of a spoon and burnish this even smoother. Now I'm going to try and get that trumpet shape a little bit. So my finger is underneath the actual rim here, and I'm pressing out just to kind of push the wall a bit. Turn the sponge over. It's very dry sponge. It's just got a little moisture in it, just to kind of lubricate just a touch. And now I'm kind of fold the sponge over the rim and put some pressure back. There you go. And that actually, with my finger underneath, I think I've created just enough of a trumpet to kind of, that will hold up into drying. Yeah, I think that'll stay all the way through the drying. Clay tends to lift and pull up a little bit as it's drying. There you go, and that is a now, I would say. I don't have my tape measure here, but it's about 21 inches across, I would say, at the moment, from a 25-pound ball of clay. All right, well, let's stick you up again. Wasn't bad. 20 minutes, okay, and I was talking a bit at the beginning. So, so basically, this has to dry for about a week, very slowly. If you dry too fast, one side will potentially crack or warp a little bit, and it won't be flat. And so I have a cupboard that I put them in. I let them dry slowly for a week, and then I will trim them, and then they dry again for another week. So it's about 2 weeks of drying, and then put them in the kiln. You've just got to dry sink slowly, and then firing the thing, you've got to fire the kiln very slowly as well, because the clay wall is really thick. You don't trim much off a sink because you want the thickness so it does, you know, survive people dropping perfume bottles in and things like that. Okay, well, this is Vaughan in Nova Scotia saying have a great fall and eat lots of pumpkin ice cream. All right, take care. All right, bye-bye.